This video is going to be a little bit different, as you probably already assumed from the title. We're going to talk a bit more about medical stuff and personal stuff and medications, finding medications that work for your chronic conditions being a ride that can affect you in way more ways than you thought at all possible. So welcome. If you are new here, my name is Kristine. I get migraines and I have PMDD and I'm also autistic. And for the last almost 3 years, my doctor and I have been trying out various medications that are targeting to reduce the number of migraines. I'm usually at between 7 to 15 migraine days per month, and my doctor wants me down under 3 migraine days per month. Which seems to me very ambitious, very pie in the sky kind of targeting, but that is apparently something that could be possible. And we've been trying different medications. Some of these medications take a very long time to try out, like you will spend a lot of time starting on a low dose and then ramping up very, very, very slowly. And when you're at the dose you're supposed to be at for where they've seen like therapeutic effects, you also have to stay there for like 12 weeks for some of these medications before you can even assess whether these meds are working or not, because they take that long for the body to sort of get used to them and for them to have an effect. As I mentioned, I also have PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric diagnosis, dysfunction. I can never remember the last C for some reason. I'll put it on screen somewhere so you can see it. And the way that plays out is way worse than like those oft ostracized, ridiculed, laughed at PMS symptoms that women have because we are in pain, because our body is ramping up hormones and being painful, and you get nauseated and bloated and all the fun stuff that if you have if you are a person who has periods, and then you multiply that by quite a lot. I never realized that I had PMDD until we started tracking my migraines and I started paying more attention to my mental health and my brain space and other things at the same time. But I started seeing, I think last year or the year before that every time that I want to give up or feel like I'm not good enough or I couldn't possibly make it, or having arguments with spouse, or just feeling really depressed and down, and just sort of all the times that are my darkest, heaviest times just so happen to occur that week before my period, never anywhere else. Never is a strong word, but like it was very clear that there was a much higher degree of depression symptoms the week before my period, so I could bring this to my doctor as well. And last March, we tried yet another medication for my migraines that used to be is still an antidepressant, but not really used anymore because we have more efficient ones with less side effects. But this old antidepressant, we tried it for my migraines, worked-ish. We're not really, the jury's still out on that. We're still not really sure if it works or not, but they did work on my PMDD. So for almost a year now, my PMDD has been more or less managed, at least much better than it used to be. So my defenses are kind of down. I'm kind of used to not having to deal with this dark, depressing cloud for a week out of the month. So after the doctor had kind of exhausted the repertoire of what she can prescribe me, love my doctor, by the way, she's amazing. I know I'm sadly very privileged and lucky in that I have a doctor that I trust has my best interest at heart, which is one of the reasons that when she says I should try medication for a while longer, even if the side effects are bad, I trust her because I know that she wants me to have a good quality of life. But I got sent to a neurologist for my migraines because there are some things that a primary care physician can prescribe, and there are some things they can't prescribe, and you need a neurologist or an expert to prescribe them, and we were getting to that point. So I had my appointment in the beginning of January, and we talked a bit. She prescribed me yet another medication, but before she did that, she asked if I had a history of depression, and I said yes, which made her dismiss a medication without naming it as not being suitable for me. And then she prescribed me what I assumed was a different medication, I still don't know, that was safe for someone with a history of depression. And when I asked about side effects, I got cited mostly physical side effects like feeling fatigue, getting dizzy walking up the stairs, feeling tired, sleep disruptions, nightmares, a couple of those things, but especially like sleep issues and dizziness and the general feeling of being exhausted was what I was hearing. So I started this medications in the beginning of January, almost immediately felt as, oh, madam, don't shoot my microphone, please. I need that for my work. Yes, the neurologist prescribed me a medication, and complete error on my part for once. I don't know, maybe I was feeling a bit tired and, demotivated at trying to find a medication that worked when in the last 3 years we hadn't found anything yet. So I didn't do my due diligence and I didn't read up on the medication before I started it, which I had done for most of the other ones. I just started it, and indeed the side effects were pretty immediate, which I've gotten used to. Like starting new meds is usually the worst, and then like it evens out is what I'm starting to understand is pretty normal. So I was feeling very heavy, very tired. Habits that I've tried to build in the last year to also try to see if they could have an impact on the migraines, such as like healthier eating, some exercising, small things like that, lifestyle habits. I'm already a pretty good sleeper. Like I have a very strong sleep schedule, and so long as I follow that, I'm generally okay. From one day to the other, that completely flipped. I was waking up exhausted, didn't want to get out of bed, wanted to stay in bed at least 2 hours longer than usual. I couldn't fall asleep, and I would wake up throughout the night multiple times and checking the clock on my side table and just, why am I not sleeping? This does not seem like a good thing. I was lucky not to get too many nightmares, but I did get a lot more vivid dreams, and everything just became sort of difficult and heavy. I stopped doing my yoga in the morning that I'd built up a habit of like nearly every day for the last year. It just vanished overnight, and I suddenly was a lot more getting back into emotional eating and comfort eating and wanting some comfort through food again. So habits that had been built just completely eradicated overnight. But I was, because this was a new medication, maybe things would even out. You kind of just go on with it and you try. And this was, I don't know if it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks that I took the medication before I hit that week before my period towards the end of January, and just everything crashed. It was, I don't even know really how to describe it. Those of you who were on the Discord server shamefully know quite well what happened, at least how the consequences played out for you. But I got hit by the biggest, most intense, most terrifying PMDD episode I have ever experienced. I went from like moderately dysfunctionally depressed to severely suicidally depressed in the span of 24 hours, and I stayed there for a week. And usually, for me at least, a depression is a feeling of apathy. I don't want to do anything, I don't feel anything, I'm just empty and down and heavy. But this was I think one of the people in the Discord described it as a turbo depression, which, yes, like this is a depression that I've heard other people experiencing, but I've never experienced myself. And it was very emotional, it was very intense, it was a lot of self-hate, a lot of just like an example that I pull out because I feel like it illustrates it a bit is the day, so the day before I got my period, I was very nauseated, as is pretty common, and my brain interpreted that as me feeling guilt and shame to the extent that the guilt and shame was making me nauseated. There was a small part of my analytical self that was sort of observing what I was doing and was trying to put on brakes but couldn't because the emotions were just too overwhelming. I knew, that little analytical part of my brain knew, that this nausea was from getting close to my period, but my emotions were still like shouting that no, this is because you are so ashamed of what you did, and things like that. And what did I do? Well, I tried to I managed to convince myself in my overwhelmed and depressed, dysregulated state, extremely emotionally volatile, that the Discord server that I derive a lot of joy from was overwhelming me, and that I needed to close it because I wasn't able to be there whenever, or I felt like I wasn't able to be there when things happened or mismanaged it. Or again, like, it's hard for me to explain this going back because it's such a different mindset to the mindset that I have now, where, spoiler alert, I'm no longer on those meds. But yeah, I was convinced that I needed to close the server and that I needed to just, I don't know, go under a rock and hide. And I had people who were trying to stop me and being like, hey, you are not usually behaving like this. What is going on? Maybe we should put on some brakes. And they tried, spouse tried, other friends tried to be like, hey, maybe we should wait a bit. And yet I was just so stuck in my own chaos whirlwind of emotions in my head. And I went through, and I still feel bad about this, but posted an announcement on the news channel that I couldn't keep the server going any longer and that I would have to close it. And which I have been criticized for, and I can understand that, because that is how it felt at the time. Like, at the time, I felt like this wasn't a negotiation because I was afraid that people will call me manipulative and think that I was trying to elicit a person to volunteer to run the server instead, as a kind of, I can't do this, someone else needs to. And that was not my intention. I didn't want anyone to think that I was trying to manipulate someone into taking over when I wasn't able to. So that is why I put that there. And then, and it was a couple of days after I'd written it, and I did end up posting it. I'm sorry to all of you guys that I scared. And then for several hours, I was just, again, extremely emotionally volatile and crying and feeling upset and feeling shame and guilt and feeling and crying because people were upset that I was closing a space that they were enjoying. And a lot of our people are also chronically ill, so like they need a space to be, and a lot of the time the only space they can be is digital because physical spaces might be too much for them. And after, I don't remember if it could have been like 4 to 5 hours or something. I was pretty much since I had posted it, I was getting this increasing feeling of dread of what have I done? What did I just do? Did I just potentially make the biggest mistake ever? And that feeling just grew and grew and grew and grew, which I think is fairly rude because it was the emotions in the first place that made me feel like I needed to close the server. Emotions are intense, folks. And after a while, I wrote in the general chat where people were being upset and figuring out where to go and things like that, and being like, hey, I realize I might just have made a huge mistake. And my community is more than I deserve, I feel, because a lot of them just came to help, and they asked questions, and they managed to ask the right questions, and we managed to workshop and problem solve and all sorts of things. And yeah, from a little short that I released now a month ago, I think, there was also stuff going on with personal messages that were going haywire. I was not managing well in my emotional state. I was just completely, again, like, I have not been suicidal in many, many, many years. And it was shocking. It was surprising to me and scary, although I don't think I really was in the frame of mind that I was able to be scared at the moment. And the scariest thing was that I didn't really know what was going on. So I scared my community something terribly. I am sorry. I'm still sorry about that. I mismanaged a lot of things. That are still my actions. Like I'm still responsible for my actions, even though was a high likelihood that this was extremely medically induced, which I will get to, because a few days after the worst had passed, so like I was done with the week before my period, and like 2 or 3 days after, when my emotions were slowly starting to return to that just like heaviness and depression that I described when I started on the medications, as opposed to that week, that the PMDD week, a spouse mentioned, which I had just completely slipped my mind, hey, you started on a new medication just like a little bit under a month ago. What if that had something to do with this? Because you don't normally act like this. So I went online and I Googled and I found the medical catalog that we have in Norway where you get all the side effects and everything. You can just search up your medication and they will have it. And true enough, one of the less common side effects was that this medication can worsen or cause severe depression. So I did what I should have done on day one when I crashed, and I contacted my doctor and I was like, hey, I just had a truly terrifying experience where I just completely lost my head. My emotions were overwhelming, and yeah, I made a lot of bad decisions. I nearly set my own community and business on fire. I have been self-sabotaging. I've been sabotaging relationships. I have just it was bad, and I don't know what to do, and I'm scared. Like, poetic irony is that I hadn't had many migraines this month. Which the first medication that we find that actually work on reducing the number of migraines that I get had just an intense amount of side effects for me. So my doctor listened to me, took me very seriously, and we talked about it. And she was like, this medication has side effects that are especially bad the first 4 to 6 weeks. So because you are still within that window, and because this is the first medication that we've found that actually reduced your migraines significantly, would you be willing to try them for one more month, one more menstrual cycle, and see if the side effects get any better? I wasn't really chuffed about potentially walking into a crash again that I can hardly even describe, because what even was that? It was absolutely awful. But as I mentioned briefly earlier, I love my doctor. I trust her to have my best interest at heart. And when she says that things can get better in a couple of weeks, so if we try, maybe it would work, I was like, all right, we can do one more month. And as a sideline too, started building guardrails on the Discord server with the community, asked for help from more moderators, and basically built system that puts brakes on me, that if I am not able to be on the internet, because why was I even on the internet that week? I should have just banned myself. Like, surely there will be no fallout that will be worse than what I just did to my community. That, like, being offline for a week with no warning and being late to respond to messages would have been preferable to what I ended up doing. So it would have been better if I just banned myself from the internet that entire week. So that was kind of what we were safeguarding for, potentially, was like having on and off people that could hold the fort if I crashed again, because these meds did the same thing again. So we tried another month, and things did get better after 6 weeks. I did see 6 weeks. I didn't have the same PMDD episode before my next period, but at the same time, I was still feeling really heavy. I was still feeling really tired. I couldn't sleep because they were really disrupting my sleep. And this is a fascinating thing. Some of you might also find it fascinating, but one of the reasons I couldn't sleep, at least I think so, unless cause and causality is flipped, was that my head was ruminating. And I have not been ruminating in many, many years. So when people talk to me that they are ruminating, they're stuck in thought circles, they're just spinning in circles, getting stuck in their head, I would not have thought of that as something a medication can cause. I would have thought that to be something that, like, if you want to work on it, you work on it with a therapist, with a licensed professional, someone you talk to and discuss, and you work on different things together. But as a side effect from a medication, I would not have guessed. But long story short, we tried them for another month. Things got a little better, but it's kind of like if a medication took you to -100, even a 10-20% increase, you're still at -80. It's still bad. I was still struggling to get up in the morning. I was struggling with daily tasks that didn't normally cause harm or be difficult to me. So things like putting on the laundry or cooking, our kitchen just got, the month of February was not a good, like, the kitchen was just bombed. It was work enough for the both of us to just manage to put the dishwasher on to keep us from running out of cutlery and plates and stuff like that. Clipping the nails of the cats. I mean, I could just name all of these things that are just classic examples of a person in depression. Is that very typical tasks that used to become easy to me suddenly became very, very difficult. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to read my books. I didn't want to go for walks or movement or anything. I just kind of was a vegetable in many ways. Like I was just a potato, just struggling. And yes, I didn't have any migraines, but I was a lot more irritable. Like I mentioned, that emotional volatility, like I would get angry at things, and I am not really a person that gets angry very often. And so when I mentioned that to my doctor, she was like, yeah, you don't really seem to me like a person who gets angry a lot. And I was a lot more irritable. So again, these are things that I've read as people getting sometimes when they are really depressed, but it was not the form of depression that I had ever experienced. But there was also a small part of me that was kind of self-gaslighting myself, going like, what if you are just using these medications as an excuse? What if you are just not really the medication's fault? Maybe you just don't want to do the yoga or want to go for a walk all of a sudden, and you are blaming it on the medications, you know? All those doubts and thoughts and questions was making it difficult. But after the month had passed, I went to my doctor, we talked about my experiences. I brought a list, like she had asked me to build a spreadsheet and like track things like sleeping and mood and whether or not I was suicidal, which did not happen again. I want to reassure you, since that week of chaos, and just sort of tracking my state of mind, my mental health, my physical health, all those sorts of things. And also write down the various symptoms that I was experiencing, that we were theorizing. Like the good thing was I was less light sensitive, and I had severely fewer migraines, and the side effects was just like a full printer page, paper-sized, just list of just one thing after the other. And we talked about it, and the doctor and I agreed that my quality of life was actually better getting 15 migraines a month than they were getting no migraines a month on this medication. So I mean, I know a lot of people have experience with chronic health and the ways it can mess with you. And it was kind of wild to me to have experienced something so bad that I would rather have the migraines. Because at least with migraines, my head is still my own, and I don't self-sabotage relationships in the same way. I'm not as much of a risk to myself and other people. But yeah, towards the end of February, we had a chat. We agreed to take me off the medications, and within 48 hours, I was starting to feel like myself again. Like I wanted to go for a walk. I snuggled the cats. I managed to trim their nails. I could change the bed sheets, and it didn't take all the spoons in the world. I did a little yoga video on YouTube that I followed along in the morning, and it was like, again, just like I went from just normal feeling to severely depressed in 24 hours. Similarly, like after 24 to 48 hours off these meds, I was myself again. It wasn't at all in my head. quotation marks, that I was just using the meds as an excuse, they really were affecting me. And spouse 2 has commented that it feels like they got their partner back because they just caused this intense, extreme depression that I have never felt the like of and hope to never feel again. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this was that we know that medications aren't tested as stringently in women as they are in med, because they weren't necessarily tested for them in the beginning. And also, modern medicine is a marvel that helps and saves millions and millions and millions of people every year. But we don't talk enough about, I think, the side effects and how they can harm you either physically or mentally or both. And I had certainly never experienced having a medication, an external drug of any kind, affect my brain to such an extreme extent. And one of the ways that I describe it is that, like, I know that antidepressants are a thing. We talk about antidepressants a lot. Like, a lot of people get a lot of good quality of life from their antidepressants, and they help a lot of people. So sort of intellectually, I know that because antidepressants are a thing, why shouldn't depressants be a thing, like a medication that does the opposite? So, like, intellectually, I could be like, yeah, that would probably be the case, that those things would exist since we have something that helps treat depression. There might also be medications that cause depression. But I had never seriously given that any thought and consideration because I never had to, and now I suddenly do. But yeah, I apologized profusely, or I tried not to do it too profusely because then people feel like they need to regulate your emotions. But the server is still there. Of course, I broke a lot of people's trust, and I can't necessarily really get that back. And I feel bad about that. I'm very grateful for the people who stayed, although I hope they don't feel like they have to stay, because I would be sad if they left. That is like, I don't know, thoughts are running away again. But and I know that the only way that I can rebuild some of that trust is to show with time that it doesn't happen again, that I don't let myself do that sort of thing again. The biggest guardrail being having other people help me so that I can step away and be like, you know what, Kristine, you need to go sit over here, and you're not allowed to make this decision until it's been at least a week. We've tried instating things like that. I told community members that they should, like, slap me with a herring, a little Monty Python reference, if I'm forgetting that community is meant to be a collaborative effort, and things like that. But I did hear from a lot of people when I talked about it in the server who also have had severe side effects on medication. The scariest thing to me is that I almost destroyed the thing that I've been building for the last several years. That's a terrifying thing for a medication to do. It was like, looking back at it, it's horrifying. And I think that, like, if it happens to me, it can happen to anybody, and it can happen to anybody, and it can be very scary. And some doctors might make you feel like you are difficult for complaining about the side effects, or saying that, hey, these side effects are worse than my condition. I would rather have my condition. You might be told that you are being difficult, or that you're being dramatic, but it is your life and your body and sort of your health that you are taking care of. So that is, I think, important to remember. The first meds that worked also didn't, in so many ways. Isn't that just a life and irony and everything? One thing that, of course, a lot of you don't have access to is a very sad example of just, you can see, like, I have evidence more than my own experience, but looking at because I do monthly Patreon updates where I, like, give the patrons a bit of an update on what I'm up to and, like, where things are going, projects and stuff like that. And you see the update for January, which was before I started the meds. I was very optimistic. I was pretty happy. I was feeling good about the year to come. And the February update was smack dab in the middle of my chaos. And I had told myself that I do updates every first of the month. So, of course, I was in that week of absolutely dreadful depression and awfulness. And I filmed the video because that's what I do. I film a video before the first of the month so that the patrons gets it on the first of the month. And you can just see like the difference between the January update and the February update is insane. It was so bad that a few days after, when again I had like the week was passing and I was slowly getting my head back a little bit, I made a new update for February for the patrons to be like, that was a lot. I was clearly not in my good headspace. I'm in a much better headspace now. Like, please don't be worried for me. Like, and trying to reassure them that I was not as sick as I had been just a few days past. Again, it's pretty intense how fast these things moved. And then again, the March update, which so one of the new rules for myself is that I will do an update like within like the last week of the month or the first week of the month. Maybe I'll just do like the first week of the month, like sometime in the first week of the month, I will do an update. If I don't feel up for it or I'm sick, I don't have to do it on the first. One of those guardrails that we talked about is things like that. So you can see that I did my March update on the 2nd of March because I let myself have the weekend. And by then I had been off my meds for 72 hours, about thereabouts, I think. And again, you could see that I was much more like this, more level-headed, more calm, more just how I normally appear in my videos, I think, like fairly even in mood and just like a good solid neutral is what I refer to most of my days at. Like I'm not super joyous, I'm not super depressed. I just ride around on this like mellow neutral, which is fairly comfortable, much preferable to anything else. And you just see like the January update was again my neutral, fairly mellow, and then the February update was absolutely awful. And the March update again having just come off the meds, I'm back to this that you see, a much more calm and collected kind of person. And yeah, I don't know who this video is going to reach, if it hits you at a time in life where you are feeling shame around your mental health or medication or side effects or anything like that. You are so not alone. Not even a little bit. This stuff is difficult, but yeah, I hope you're able to be kind to yourself about this, because sometimes meds just run around and kick us in the head, evidently. So that's it for this slightly different video. I'll try to get us back to more crafting and textile history and sciencey content momentarily, but I wanted to share this because I feel like we don't share enough stories about the sort of backside of the marvel that is modern medicine. I've seen also more and more cancer patients talk about, hey, I didn't just survive or win the battle against cancer. I did also get hurt. A lot of it sucked. The cancer took this, and this from me, or the meds gave me these. Like there were all these awful things that also happened concurrently that people often don't want to talk about because they just want to talk about how you beat or survived, or like they just want to hear the winning story. They don't want to hear the parts that were really bad. And I had hoped that, like in a small way, this might contribute to a little bit more openness about how there is good and bad when it comes to any sort of medical, both procedure or medication or whatever have you. But with that, I wish you a very merry rest of your day, and I shall see you soon. Bye. May I kidnap you, madam? Can we show the audience how you did in the sling? Oh, is a good girl. I'm not sure she's going to want to stay long this time, but I just kind of slide her in. She's going to decide if she wants to stay with us or not. And then I kind of tighten. This is a ring sling meant for human babies, great for void babies as well. And then we just kind of, if she wants to chill, she chills. And if she doesn't, she'll get out. And sometimes she will like struggle a bit, and I will put a hand under her bum so she has somewhere to kick against, something that gets her out. And sometimes she will snooze. Oh, baby. Can you hear that?